Hey there, this is Michael F Schein. I am the author of the Hype Handbook, 12 Indispensable Success Secrets from the world's greatest propagandists, self-promoters, cult leaders, mischief makers, and boundary breakers, published by McGraw-Hill. I am also the founder of Reframing Media. Today on the show, we are going to talk about why becoming a hype artist is your moral imperative, what religious cults, Basecamp, and Tony Robbins have in common, and what B2B businesses and all kinds of corporations can learn from Kim Kardashian and Captain Kirk.
Welcome back to part two of our delicious conversation with Michael F Schein. You can find him at Michael F Schein. That's SCHEIN.com. He is the world's foremost expert on hype, and he's written the quintessential handbook on it called the Hype Handbook, 12 Indispensable Success Secrets of the world's greatest propagandists, self-promoters, cult leaders, mischief makers, and boundary breakers. We were talking about hype in the first part and about how it needs to be redefined. We've often held it as this negative idea, but it is actually, it's not negative, it's not positive, it's kind of amoral rather. It just sits in the middle there, and we decide what we want to do with it. And Michael was talking about how he had done a ton of research and interviews and books and biographies looking at some of the world's best at this, who are not necessarily marketers, but people who started religions and cults and political parties and done things that were massive in the world using these techniques. And he wanted to find out what they were. He found that there were 12 sort of foundational things that were in there that he's laid out beautifully in this book. And as somebody who's read the book, I highly recommend it to you, that you will go, oh my goodness, of course. And for me, that's always the greatest compliment, is when you read a book and you go, of course, you know that is hitting home for you. It absolutely is. And that's what this book did. Now, we talked about all these things in the first part. In the second part here, I want to start with this. Michael and I have gotten to know each other personally outside of the interviews and had many conversations. And the truth of the matter is that Michael interviewed me many years ago before we really knew who each other were. So you've done this whole thing around understanding hype and reframing hype. Was there a time when you were not using what it is you're teaching, when you were, quote, underhyping yourself, underselling yourself, and now you've become the founder of Reframing Media, and you've got major organizations coming to you? Was there a time when you just weren't using those skills?
Yeah, very much so. I guess depending on how you look at it, I used to be horrible at this thing that people would call sales. Yeah, really bad. So the thing about me is I never, you know this about me, but the audience probably doesn't. I never wanted to be a business person. In fact, I didn't like the concept of business. When I thought of business, I thought of, I don't know, spreadsheets and Scrooge McDuck, right? I mean, finance and, whatever.
And sold the negative hype.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it was business, right? I mean, it was a discipline. Like law is a discipline. Now I see it as a mechanism for making the things I want to have happen in the world and happen and delivering, whatever some of making people's lives better that I can through whatever gifts I have. It's the society we live in. That's the best mechanism to do that in. But at the time, I was really allergic to that. And also, I'm not a particularly salesy kind of guy. I wasn't the guy I was creative. I always had, I was writing stories and starting bands and starting zines and all this stuff, but I wasn't that guy who you always hear about, who I was selling baseball cards, selling lemonade, pitching this stuff. I wasn't good at that. I didn't do it. I didn't care. So, I tried my hand at the artsy thing for quite a few years, and we can talk about that because it's relevant. But the main thing is I then had a corporate job, and because I'm a good worker, I'm a hard worker, I'm a smart guy. I started to do well there. And I
Yes.
was able to say what I needed to say, do what I needed to do, and climb the ladder. But by the end of the 8-year stint, I really was unhappy there. And my old like artsy self I forgot about it. So I decided, since I was a good writer and I knew about the corporate world, I was going to go be like a corporate copywriter, a freelance content writer. And so I left, and I figured because I was a good writer, I would do well. It turned out I almost went broke. I had a year's worth of savings, and I just was so bad at sales. I mean, people would call me up and say, "Oh, your stuff looks interesting." And I would spend a week doing a sales proposal, send it to some random person who called me, and then never hear from them again and be depressed for a week. You know, I would jump and run. I had no idea what I was doing. I was never shy in that I can always have a conversation, but I was shy to ask for money. I was shy to all of that stuff. So I'm a great test case, because there are people who are really natural hype artists.
Yes.
Most of the people I looked at in this book, they didn't study this stuff. I mean, they just have that knack. Sure. I had the opposite. I didn't have the knack at all, but I was fascinated. My heroes were people who did that kind of stuff. I always liked art that had an element of the circus, an element where the hype adds to the art. Like I love David Bowie, and his music was great, but part of what made him so great was he was the biggest star in the world before anyone knew who he was. He showed up in limos before he had 2 cents, right? And I liked that. I thought that added color. So I approached that. I was always a good student. And I said, what if I studied these people? Can I emulate that? Are there principles there? Or are these people, if you don't have the knack, can you just never do it? Right. Or is this something that you can learn? And I found out that you can learn it, that it takes some emotional regulation. You have to make sure that you're doing things that maybe you're a little bit uncomfortable with. But I totally transformed myself in my career. I mean, I think the fact that I'm not natural at it allows me to teach it and train other people. When I work with clients who aren't natural at it, I can really help them design experiments that fit who they are and execute them to hype themselves up in a way that works for them and that's comfortable for them. Whereas I think if I came to it naturally, I wouldn't have been able to do that.
But I think that, you just brought up something that's very interesting, that, you talked about being uncomfortable with sales and things like that. And that becomes like, I was the same thing. Like, people don't know that about me, but just brutally painful to do sales for me.
Yeah.
And everybody thought, oh, you're a natural salesman. No, I hated it. But
I didn't understand it. I should say that too. I hated it, and I didn't get how it worked,
Yeah. So I at least understood how it worked, but I hated it.
Yeah.
But that hating it was actually not true. It was a wonderful excuse to not do it.
Sure.
And so when you talked about that emotional discipline, that if you create a moral label and stick on it and go, these people are unethical and they're immoral, then I don't have to learn that. As opposed to, hold on a second. Yeah, they may be, but can you be an ethical and moral individual doing something like this? And the answer is yes. And that's what this book lays out beautifully.
I'm chomping at the bit to like interrupt almost, because like I have a lot of friends who are writers, like fiction writers, because I still have one foot in that world of writing. And a lot of those friends, not all, but some of them will say to me, it's like a cliche. The publishing company wants you to do your own marketing. I just want to write. Why should I focus on marketing? I'm not here to market. I'm here to write. And I get it. I'm not putting that down. I mean, they're here. That's what they want to do. They want to write, but the world is what the world is, right? So what if, though, you looked at it differently? What if you said, let me look at some writers, for example, and this is just one industry that I happen to know about. What if I look at some writers where it wasn't like marketing was this necessary evil that you had to do, but where it was embedded in what you did? And that's why I don't use the word marketing, and I don't like the word marketing, and I don't think it's a good concept, because marketing means that it's a separate thing. It's okay, we made our book, we made our business. Now let's do the social media SEO advertising mumbo jumbo that like we do, versus hype, which is, it should be baked into your DNA at every stage. So I don't know, I'm trying to think of a writer. I mean, Hunter S. Thompson, right? He was a writer. You don't think of him as a marketer, but when he was driving across country doing drugs, he made sure you knew about it every step of the way. I mean, the guy committed suicide and had his ashes shot in a rocket into space. The guy, so it wasn't like, I am now marketing my book. Every part of his life and death had hype baked into it, and it added color. The work was richer for the hype. And that's what I'm aiming for. That's my mission. This is not like sales. If you say, okay, now it's time to sell. No, I mean, there's a way to sell that's integrated into what you do, and it makes people's lives better. And I wish someone would come up with a word that wasn't sales and wasn't business development, that sort of spoke to that. And I think hype is
well, I think that in many ways,
yeah,
I think in many ways the word that is now used is story. You know, so people still talk about story, but again, it's one of those things that, yeah, you don't really get it.
I don't really get what that, people say that, but that's yeah, maybe.
Right.
Yeah.
But they don't really get it. Whereas what I loved about, like I said, about your book is that the redefinition of the word hype, and here are 12 let's lay them out. These are the 12. Now go do with them whatever you want to do. You can hire Michael and his team, or you can just apply it yourself to whatever degree, but you will get results, because as we talked about before, these are things that human beings respond to. That's it. It's not right, wrong, good, bad, left, right, or anything else. It's just, this is what human beings respond to.
It's funny because even if you were to hire my team, I'm sorry to say you're doing a lot of the work yourself. And here's why. For many years, I always had this philosophy, but I had a pretty traditional agency model. So people would come to us and they would say, we really love your approach, et cetera, et cetera. And then I would have to do the work for them, because that's what agencies do. Sure. And what I found was there were problems with that. What happens is, if you give up ownership of any part of your business, you become detached from it. So you say to someone, market me. And it's like, okay, so I'll do your social media based on hype principles. I'll do your content based on hype principles. I'll set up interviews for you based on hype principles. But ultimately, you need to speak the way we created. You need to dress the way we created. You need to go out in the world and conduct little experiments on your own. And if you, by having a company do everything for you, the tactics, it just devolves into another version of, hey, can I have 6 taglines by Friday? Everyone's doing Clubhouse. Why don't you do some? And it becomes something that doesn't help the client. So I changed our model for this reason, because what I realized was, yeah, it's not enough. I mean, reading a book's great. You can learn a lot, but having no guidance, having no structure, having no one by your side is hard. At the same time, having someone do everything for you defeats the purpose. So what we do, we have a structured process where we focus on one hype principle, then we collaborate to build experiments based on those principles, and we're partners in building them, and we assess the data and iterate them. We come up with the ideas with you, but I want you, at least for that minimum viable step, putting one foot in front of the other, doing it. Not because it's easier for us, but because if you don't do that, it doesn't get baked into your DNA. It does not sustain for the long run. And some people don't want to hire us now. It's kind of like the Who thing. Some people have turned us down because they're like, we don't have time. We want to bring people on. And I've left money on the table, and it hurts to do, but I don't think it's the right way to, I think it doesn't work the other way, at least for my approach.
It's very interesting because, because we've discussed this in my work is on the anatomy of meaning, and that nothing happens unless people associate meaning to it. And that gives us the emotional source code of humans and of companies. And one of the things I'll say is that, if you if you're not emotionally connected to it yourself,
Correct.
then it doesn't stick. It doesn't land with you. And you'll be off on the next tangent, the next cool thing that's coming along, i.e. Clubhouse. Right. You know, people say to me, how come you're not on Clubhouse? Everybody's on Clubhouse, you know, and you could do so well. Not interested. And they go, why? Because I don't need another freaking distraction. And they go, but it's the new thing. I understand it's the new thing. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm saying I know people it's very good for.
It's a tool. Just like a computer is a tool and a typewriter is a tool. But if you're showing up on the tool, if you're showing up on the tool without knowing the essence of your own meaning and the essence of what is real for you, so it's that emotional investment that, you know, it's really interesting. Your work is about having people become emotionally invested in my company or in me or in my product or whatever it is. But I can't expect people to become emotionally invested in my company and my product and my service if I'm not emotionally invested in how the messaging is going. No, it couldn't have said it better myself. I mean, it's just, you know, it's very difficult if we're working under the thesis that hype is superior to just doing marketing tactics. And by hype, that means all of the time getting people deeply emotional about your stuff so that you take an action. If you don't embody that every step of the way as the founder, as the CEO, as the chief marketing officer, as the employee, it's only a matter of time before it falls apart. If it ever gets traction in the first place.
Yeah, if it gets traction. That's a very good point. Now, you know, I was saying at the end of part one that one of the things I wanted to talk to you about is this blurred line that has begun to take place. You and I are old enough to remember a time when business had nothing to do with entertainment, and it was kind of like shunned upon. And now we're in a time, the social media age, let's call it. I don't know if that's the right term, but where entertainment, education, and business have become overlaps. There is a vector point somewhere in there. And in many ways, it is kind of like theater. You know, like, so, you know, we talk about, I remember going to Mexico on a holiday, and we went to this is many years ago. We were in this place, and the main restaurant in this place was called a theater restaurant, and we'd never heard of such a thing. Yeah. And what it was, there was cameras in the kitchen, and you could hear the chefs screaming at each other and the flames, and it was kitchen theater. It was really a live cooking show.
Yeah, I've never heard of that in that way, but
it was brilliant, and the food was extraordinarily good, but people were going for the entertainment. You know, because oftentimes you see people sitting at dinner and like, just glaring at each other or looking at their bloody phones and don't know what to say. And this was very entertaining, and it gave people something to talk about. And it was, for me, I always remember that as being this enormously brilliant example of understanding the theater of business. I know that you're sort of ahead of the curve on that one, talking about where that's going. Tell us what you see.
There are so many ways to talk about this very fascinating topic. It's funny. Just as I've been dying to say this to somebody publicly, and this is a perfect segue, but I thought shooting William Shatner into space on an Amazon rocket is the perfect, like, when they study our modern era, they'll look at this. This was a guy who is an actor who played one of the most famous space captains of all time, who a major public company is putting on a spaceship for publicity. But the guy was inspired by the show that the actor did to start the space company. And the actor so identifies with the show that he wanted to do it because he sees himself at least partially as Captain Kirk. I mean,
he really does.
Right. But it's this weird, that's our whole world. Like, everything, the world has become, we live in this media saturated entertainment world where the line, especially in the United States, although it's leaked out into other countries, but we invented this thing. We're like we're like a fictionalized like reality, so that was just intellectually interesting to me.
We are in many, I mean, we can get into the philosophy of it, and I don't want to do that here right now. We don't have time, but we are living in the Truman Show. All of us, and we're all willing participants in the Truman Show. We're not Truman who doesn't know, we're Truman who does know.
Right.
But in the context of Hype and my business, or our listeners' business, our viewers' business, this understanding of the theater of business, that blurring line, what sort of your, I wouldn't say prophecy, but your push forward with that? What are you seeing?
I think what we're seeing now is a kind of steroid juiced version of what's always existed in at least in the era of capitalism. I mean, there's a quote in my book by Jan Carlson, who's the CEO, I think, of Southwest Airlines, who said, all business is show business. So, I mean, one of the principles in my book is theatricality, but what people don't remember is that theater doesn't always mean lights and sound and this and that. The original theater was a bunch of people with masks on a stage, acting out stories. So, I think there's always been an element of showmanship. This is maybe what people mean by story. It's, setting up an antagonist, setting up a protagonist, making people feel like they're, by taking part in what you're selling, they're a participant of a big drama that is bigger than themselves. I think the best business people have maybe always done that to a certain extent, especially since mass media. I mean, in the early days of factories, I don't know if that was really so important, but in for years and years. I think what's different now is that it's available to all of us. I mean, I see people who I'm really fascinated by these things called reaction videos. There are people on YouTube who watch movies or listen to songs that they've ostensibly never heard before. I mean, who knows? And they react to them. And these people, some of them have millions and millions of views. So the idea is anyone with a computer camera, a phone, a microphone can avail themselves of the tools of theatricality that you used to have to hire an advertising agency for, or start or be in the movie industry. And I have an 11-year-old daughter. A lot of you would say, well, it's unprofessional. She would any day of the week rather watch homegrown YouTube videos than watch a slickly produced Hollywood movie. So again, turning a strength into a weakness. So I think theatricality has been around forever. Religions have used theatricality, bombarding the senses. I mean, if you look at a Pentecostal rally and if you look at a Tony Robbins thing, they use the same techniques to get people jacked up. But I think the difference is now we all have it available to ourselves. So if we learn the strategies, you can use very, very cheap technology to get a very big psychological effect.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I think that there's also a level of, particularly generationally. So I'm certainly talking about my own generation, but there is a snobbery to it, meaning, we produce very high quality products, and these people are amateurs. Yeah, but these people now have 5 million people following them. I mean, I was reading about this guy. I'm trying to remember his name right now. I'm sorry, I don't remember it. But he's very famous on TikTok and Instagram Reels. And he's African-American kid, young kid who lost his job at the beginning of the pandemic and who never has spoken on video. He's a multi-millionaire now with millions and millions of followers. And all he does is he takes a video clip that somebody else has done of, for instance, they're advertising a mirror that you can look in from the back seat, and so to not open your door because you might knock somebody off a bicycle. right? And all he does is he watches that ad, and then you see him in his car, and he presses the back window down, looks out the window, and goes like this with his
Yeah.
hands, right? And he's never said a word, and he's got millions and millions and millions of followers, and has become a multi-millionaire because it's not about slick. And that's the thing I think that is the trap. It's that my generation, and maybe Gen X and some others, think it's about how you become slick, and it's not. It's about how you engage.
I also think the lesson to take from this isn't I'm going to try to make raw videos and become a viral sensation, because there's a lot of competition.
Yep.
The lesson is to apply some of these strategies, because that's the lesson I see people taking. They start making videos because they think it's going to get viral, whatever that means, which is very hard to do. Yeah. The lesson is that you can take your limitations if you understand the concepts of theatricality, the way to weave, a narrative, bombarding the senses, things like that, which I do talk about in the book, but we can talk about here. I know we're limited on time. You can use those strategies very quick and easy and dirty to get a big impact. Which is, I mean, if you're selling a product for $100,000, you don't need that many followers, right? You don't need to go viral. I think one antidote to that snobbery that you're talking about is either having a preteen kid or getting to know them. Because if you see the way they operate in the world, people who have grown up on this, like my girl, she, her favorite thing to watch is this guy, Albert, who has a channel called Flamingo. He's basically this idiot guy, not such an idiot, but he acts like an idiot, who watches video games and plays them like Roblox and screams and spit flies out of his mouth and this and that. I mean, he's got his own merch. I mean, they think he's hilarious. And these videos cost $10 to make. It's crazy.
Yeah. That's a great thing. So as we sort of coming to the end here, I just want to give us a practical tip that particularly somebody in the business world can say, okay, I can take the practicality of this for the concepts of theatricality and potentially and use this in my boring old business, that doesn't seem to have any of that stuff in it, doesn't seem to be the appropriate place for it. What would be a practical tip that somebody could go out and say, let's do this?
I think that's so key, because one of the big pushbacks I get whenever I speak on this, they say this stuff is fascinating, the stories are great, but I'm not David Bowie, right? I'm an insurance, I own an insurance adjusting company. Like how is this for me? And it's very much applicable to everything, but there are certain strategies. I believe in a ladder effect. Start with the ones you can do very quick and dirty, and then add on the other stuff. Tony Robbins didn't start with his big bonanza bombarding you with lights. He was in a backyard, or whatever, but he knew how to hype himself. So one strategy the other thing to layer on that is that hype isn't always about flash and panache. Right. It's about mass psychology. So, for example, one of my favorite strategies that I've probably used more than any, and I think you've used without knowing it, is something I call the piggybacking method. So the concept is that what most great hype artists do is they make it seem like all of their growth is grassroots, that they just have this product or service or show or thing that is so great that people just started discovering it and one by one spread the word. What typically, because that's more romantic, so you got to foster that concept. But what a lot of them do is, while they're making that seem like it's the case, they spend a lot of time nurturing what I call human pressure points. So you find people who are well placed to spread the word about what you do and affect 10,000 people or 1,000 people. And you spend a long time or a while nurturing those relationships, and at a key moment, you hit them all up at the same time, and it looks like there's a grassroots explosion. So how do you start doing that today? Couple of things. One thing is do what our friend Dov here is doing and create a piece of media that's easy to do, like a podcast. Now, it's not easy to make a good podcast, and it's not easy to build a big following, which you have done. However, some people don't know one piece of media from the other, and self-fulfilling prophecy is a very important thing. So let's say you start a podcast and you say to people, hey, I'm profiling the top 30 X, Y, and Z target market people in your industry. I'd love to, you're on my short list. Can I have a conversation with you about maybe being on my show? I mean, I had a client who she didn't even have a show yet. And we did that with the head of Pixar's photography, director of photography. And she was like, oh my gosh, thank you so much. I'm never honored in front of the camera. And she became a key associate for this person. So appealing to ego, appealing to the desire for exposure and appreciation is very powerful. And to go beyond the tactic of the podcasting, think in terms of what is something that's cheap for you to give up and very valuable for other people. And I don't just mean cheap financially. So one of the key mentors in my life is a gentleman who started a $500 million company. And I happened to meet him. I interviewed him for a writing opportunity, and he would have just forgotten about me. But he had just moved to New York from Indiana, and I was a nobody at the time. I was very early on. And he said, you know, I just moved here. One of the reasons I moved here, I love live music, but I don't know of any of the venues to go for. Now, this guy could have gotten a private jet, but he didn't know the venues. And I'm a music fan, so I knew the venues. And I said, hey, it'd be my pleasure to show you around. Something I could give him that was extremely valuable to him and extremely easy for me. So if you can get in that mindset, people will respond to you. People will talk to you. And spend some time nurturing them. And then when you have something to offer, it's like asking a friend for a favor. It's not like asking a networking associate, and you can really blow up, quickly.
Michael, I have, as always, my friend, sincerely enjoyed this conversation. It has been truly wonderful and insightful for everybody. I mean, I think there's some really, truly practical, powerful insights in this. But in saying that, I want to be clear, read the book, right? You don't often hear me say that, even on this show. Read the book. I promise you, you will get so much out of it. And moreover, I encourage you to not just read the book, but go to Curiosity Bites. There are a 4-part interview with Michael there. We talk about all these things in really great depth, and talk about it even at a world level and a political level, and all the different levels you wouldn't necessarily think about. Some a bit controversial, but really giving you insights you could never even imagine. It's a very powerful interview. I highly recommend it. And I'm really grateful for you being here today. I think you've just really added a ton of value. So thank you, Michael. It was a pleasure and honor to have you on.
I always love our conversations, and I love this show and have for a long time. So thank you for having me.
Wonderful. Thank you, Michael. And for you, dear listener, remember that we will post all the links to finding Michael, finding his book in the show notes. But remember that you can hang out with other conscious leaders. You can chat about this episode that you've been listening to, or any of our past episodes inside of our Facebook or LinkedIn groups. Just look for the Leadership and Loyalty Podcast. It doesn't matter how successful you are. If your employees, your customers, your teams don't really understand what gives your company meaning, you're only working at a fraction of your true capability, because it is meaning that connects people emotionally, exactly what Michael was talking about. To find out how you can hire me, Dov Baron, as a speaker or leadership strategist for yourself or your organization, simply go to dovbaron.com. That's DOVBARON.com, because unified actualized meaning is the one single monolithic difference between mediocrity and greatness for all individuals and companies. I want to thank you for sharing the show with everybody you know. Till next time, stay curious, my friend. Stay curious about how you can really apply this new understanding of hype, those 12 pieces that you can do to change the perception in the world and have people become emotionally connected to you in a way that allows you to make the difference that you want to make and make this world a happier, better place. I'm Dov Baron. I'm here to assist you tapping into your deepest meaning to reach that next level of clarity, focus, purpose, and profit in your business, your life, and your leadership impact. And I am out.